when the Green Meadows Homeowners Association declared my inherited, wild land an intolerable eyesore, they had no idea they were about to pay me to protect the very wilderness they despised. It all started with a patch of dirt and trees my grandpa left me. It wasn't much, just 5 acres of untouched North Carolina woods bordering the back end of a new, painfully pristine housing development called Green Meadows. For me, that land was sacred. It was where Grandpa taught me how to identify oak trees, where we'd sit and listen to the cicadas on summer evenings. It was a piece of my past, a quiet sanctuary. For the residents of Green Meadows, it was apparently an intolerable eyesore. The letters started arriving about 6 months after the last house in the development was sold. The first one was almost polite, printed on thick cream-colored cardstock with the Green Meadows Homeowners Association logo embossed at the top. It was a friendly reminder about community standards and the importance of property upkeep, with a pointed suggestion that the overgrowth on the adjacent lot was becoming a concern. I chuckled and tossed it. My land wasn't a lot, it was woods. That's what woods do. They grow. The second letter, a month later, was less friendly. It mentioned specific HOA bylaws I was not subject to, and referenced potential fines for unmanaged vegetation and creating a habitat for vermin. This time, I didn't toss it. I called the number for the HOA board. The woman who answered introduced herself as Carol, the board president. Her voice was dripping with the kind of condescending sweetness that makes your teeth ache. "Yes," she chirped, after I explained who I was. "We're so glad you called. We were just about to send a third notice. Your lawn is simply getting out of hand." "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my patience. "With all due respect, I don't have a lawn. It's a wooded property. And more importantly, I'm not a member of your HOA. My property isn't part of Green Meadows." There was a pause. "Well, that's a matter of perspective, isn't it? Your property directly impacts our property values. The bylaws are quite clear about maintaining a neat appearance for the good of the community." It was like talking to a brick wall, a very smug, entitled brick wall. I ended the call by politely telling her to stop sending me notices, as they didn't apply to me. I thought that would be the end of it. And boy, was I wrong. A few weeks later, I drove out to the property. It was a beautiful spring Saturday, and I just wanted to walk the trails, maybe clear a few fallen branches. I parked my truck on the dirt pull-off and was about to head into the trees when a golf cart came zipping down the paved cul-de-sac and screeched to a halt right at the edge of the manicured lawn that met my property line. Behind the wheel was a woman with a severe blonde bob, wrap-around sunglasses, and a visor that seemed permanently attached to her forehead. It had to be Carol. She hopped out, hands on her hips. "Excuse me, can I help you?" she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "No, thank you, I'm fine," I said, giving a polite nod. "This is private property," she said, taking a step onto my land. "You can't just park here and wander around." I just stared at her, blinked a few times. "This is my private property," I said, gesturing to the woods behind me. "I'm the owner." She let out a short, barking laugh. "Oh no, you're mistaken. This is all HOA common area. We maintain it." I couldn't believe the audacity. "Ma'am, I assure you, I own this land. The survey markers are right over there. My family has owned it for 60 years. Her face hardened, the fake sweetness completely gone. "I am the HOA president. I think I know what land this HOA owns. We've been sending notices to the delinquent owner for months. Now I'm telling you, for the last time, get off our land." Her voice had risen to a near shriek on the last few words. Her chest was puffed out, a finger jabbing in my direction. People were starting to peek out of their perfectly identical windows. This was a spectacle. I took a deep breath, trying to be the calm adult. "Look, Carol, this is a simple misunderstanding. This is parcel number 75B. It's not, and has never been, part of Green Meadows." That was the wrong thing to say. Her face turned a shade of crimson I'd only ever seen on a boiled lobster. "How do you know my name? Are you stalking me?" "That's it." She whipped out a jewel-encrusted smartphone from her tennis skirt. "I am calling the police. You are trespassing, and you are harassing me." She's dialing 911. And as I hear her telling the dispatcher that a suspicious man is trespassing on HOA property and refusing to leave, I realize this has gone from a simple disagreement to something much, much worse. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived in a single cruiser, looking profoundly bored. Carol immediately transformed into the damsel in distress. "Oh, officers, thank God you're here," she cried, one hand pressed dramatically to her chest. "This man, he just appeared. He parked his rusty old truck and was lurking in the woods, right behind our children's play area. When I asked him to leave our private property, he became aggressive and started threatening me." One of the deputies, a man with a tired face and a thick mustache, turned to me. "What's going on here, sir?" I kept my hands visible and my voice calm. "Officer, my name is Mark. This is my land. My family has owned this parcel for 60 years. My grandfather left it to me. I was just here to walk the property line." Carol let out an indignant squawk. "He's lying. This is the Green Meadows common area. It's a buffer zone. The developer told us." The deputy sighed, the sound of a man who had dealt with 1,000 petty neighborhood disputes. "Sir, do you have a deed or any proof of ownership on you?" "Yeah." "It's at my house, in a safe," I admitted, "but I can get it. The county plat maps will clearly show this parcel is privately owned and not part of the Green Meadows subdivision." "It doesn't matter," Carol interjected, stepping closer to the deputy, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "We have a real problem with vagrants trying to camp back there. For the safety of our community, he needs to be removed." The deputy looked at my clean shirt and my well-kept truck. He looked back at Carol's frantic expression. He was trapped. He couldn't settle a decades-old property line dispute on a Saturday afternoon, but he had a hysterical resident, the HOA president no less, claiming I was a threat. He took the path of least resistance. "Look, son," he said to me, his tone apologetic but firm. "I can't arrest you for trespassing without clear proof, but I've got a resident complaint. To de-escalate the situation, I'm going to have to ask you to leave for today. You can sort out the paperwork with the HOA and the county on Monday morning." My jaw tightened. "You're asking me to leave my own property?" "For now, yes. Just to keep the peace." Carol's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated triumph. She stood with her arms crossed, a smug little smile playing on her lips as I walked back to my truck. "Thank you, officer," she said, her voice dripping with syrupy gratitude. "We all feel so much safer now." I sat in my truck for a full minute, the engine off, just staring at her as she preened for the deputies. The humiliation was a hot coal in my stomach. She hadn't just won. She had used the system to make me a criminal on my own land. Fighting her directly was a fool's errand. She lived for this kind of drama. I couldn't beat her at her own game. I needed to change the game entirely. And that's when the idea, fully formed and glorious in its petty brilliance, slammed into my brain. I started the truck, a slow grin spreading across my face. Carol wanted the land so bad? She could have it. The second I got home, I bypassed my property records and went straight for my grandpa's old filing cabinet. I found a dusty folder labeled Green Meadows. Inside was a treasure trove. Letters from the original developers from over a decade ago, practically begging my grandpa to sell them the 5 acres to use as a community park and nature amenity. He had flatly refused every offer. They wanted it then, and judging by Carol's fanaticism, the HOA wanted it now. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the large property management corporation that ran Green Meadows. I didn't ask for the complaint department. I asked for the vice president of regional acquisitions. After a few transfers, I had a man named Henderson on the line. "Mr. Henderson," I began, my voice the picture of professional courtesy. "My name is Mark, and I'm the owner of the 5-acre wooded parcel that borders your Green Meadows community. I believe your HOA president, Carol, has expressed a very strong interest in the property." There was a wary silence. "We have received some communications regarding that parcel. Yes," he said carefully. "Excellent," I said. "Then you'll be happy to hear that I'm prepared to make the HOA an exclusive offer. I'm willing to lease them the entire 5 acres for a nominal annual fee, say $10,000. They can use it as their own private Green Meadows nature preserve. They can build walking trails, put up benches, advertise it as a luxury amenity. All I ask is that the HOA takes full responsibility for all maintenance, security, and liability for the property. I could hear him sit up straighter through the phone. I was handing him a massive win-a-new, marketable amenity for a community that was clearly obsessed with it, and all for a price that was a rounding error in their annual budget. "That's a very generous offer, Mark," Henderson said, his voice now slick with corporate enthusiasm. "I'm sure the board will be thrilled. Send over a draft of the lease agreement. I can probably get it approved by the end of the week." "I'll have it in your inbox within the hour," I said, barely containing my glee. "I've already got a template drawn up." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding with victory. The trap was set. Henderson, and by extension Carol and the entire HOA board, were so blinded by the prize they wouldn't even bother to read the fine print. They didn't know that my template was a custom document my lawyer cousin owed me a favor for. They didn't know that buried in the dense legalese of Section 12, subsection C, was a little clause titled Landlord's Aesthetic and Environmental Discretion, a clause that gave me, the landlord, sole and absolute authority to approve or deny any and all alterations to the property, right down to the trimming of a single tree branch. They were about to sign a contract that legally obligated them to maintain my woods exactly as they were, while paying me for the privilege. Carol was about to become the highly paid, legally bound warden of the very wilderness she despised. The next 2 weeks were agonizingly quiet. I sent the lease agreement, packed with more legal jargon than a law library, and waited. Henderson emailed me back within a day, saying he'd passed it on to the HOA's legal team for review, and expected a swift approval. Apparently, their legal team was about as diligent as their HOA president was observant. I got the signed contract back in my inbox, digitally countersigned by none other than Carol herself, in her capacity as board president. I printed a copy, framed it, and hung it on my wall. It was a masterpiece. Phase 2 of my plan began a month later. I gave them time to get comfortable, to start bragging. I could just imagine the smug announcement in the HOA newsletter. Board secures exclusive access to new 5-acre nature preserve for residents. I bet Carol threw a party. I chose another beautiful Saturday, the kind that screamed suburban yard work. I drove out to my land and parked my truck in the exact same spot as before. This time, however, I wasn't just there to walk. I unloaded a folding chair, a cooler full of iced tea, and a good book. I set up my little camp right on the edge of the property line, in full view of the cul-de-sac. It took less than 15 minutes. The golf cart came zooming into view, a tiny chariot of fury. Carol hopped out, but this time she wasn't alone. A tall, thin man, who looked like he'd just stepped out of a Brooks Brothers catalog, was with her. Her husband, I presumed, brought along for backup. "You again," she shrieked, her voice somehow even higher pitched than before. "I thought we had you removed. This is HOA property now. We have a lease. Get off my land." I didn't stand up. I didn't even lower my book. I simply took a slow sip of my iced tea and smiled benignly at her. "Morning, Carol. Lovely day, isn't it?" "Don't you." "Morning, Carol me," she sputtered. "I'm not going to call the police this time. I'm going to have you arrested. We are leasing this land. It belongs to us now." Her husband stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "You heard her, pal. Time to pack it up." "You're right," I said calmly, finally closing my book and setting it aside. "The HOA is leasing this land for the generous price of $10,000 a year." I let that sink in. "And you know who they're leasing it from?" "Me." I savored the moment of pure, uncomprehending silence. Carol's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror. Her husband just looked lost. What are you talking about?" Carol stammered. "I'm Mark," I said, extending a hand which she ignored. "The owner. The delinquent owner you were so keen on harassing. When you called the cops on me for standing on my own property, I decided a different approach was needed. So I called your management company and offered them a lease. A lease which you, as board president, signed." Her face went pale. "No, that's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," I said, my smile widening. "And it's a very specific lease. I suggest you go home and read Section 12, subsection C. It's the part titled Landlord's Aesthetic and Environmental Discretion. It gives me, the landlord, complete and total say over any changes to this property. You can't trim a branch, you can't clear a path, you can't even pick up a pine cone without my express written permission, which, I assure you, you will never get. I stood up and walked towards the tree line. You see, Carol, you and your HOA are now legally and financially obligated to maintain these 5 acres as a pristine, untouched wilderness. You wanted my land? You got it. You're now paying me $10,000 a year to be the glorified groundskeeper of the very overgrowth you despise. Every letter you sent me, every threat you made, it all led to this. You played yourself. I gestured grandly at the trees. Welcome to the Mark Grandpa Memorial Nature Preserve. Per our legally binding contract, your first maintenance check is due on the 1st of the month. I'd hate to have to send you a friendly reminder. Carol stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Her husband was already backing away, wanting no part of the nuclear fallout that was about to occur. She looked from me to the woods, then back to me, the smug triumph she'd worn like a crown, now shattered into a million pieces. All the color had drained from her face, replaced by the ghastly, mottled gray of pure, impotent rage. And one more thing, I added, unable to resist twisting the knife one last time. As the landlord, I retain the right to enjoy my property whenever I please. So don't be surprised if you see me out here often. I found it's a wonderfully peaceful place to sit and read. I picked up my chair and cooler. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to take a walk on my land that you pay for.